Hello, Waswere here, back with another video, and today we are going to be looking at an extremely powerful interaction that has been surfacing over the past couple weeks. The Healing Crystal. So what the hell is the Healing Crystal? It's a crystal that when in your inventory every time that you heal, whether it be by Resonance, Soul Split, or whatever, you will take 25% of that heal as damage. It's supposed to be a nerf to make content harder. And you're probably asking yourself, why do I want something that reduces my healing? Well, it's pretty simple. The biggest problem with poison builds is that if you're at max HP, you no longer heal, and if you don't heal, then the Blood Reaver Familiar can't do damage, and if the Blood Reaver Familiar can't do damage, then its hits will not proc poison. To show off the power of this, let's look at Greater Ricochet. With max gear, Greater Ricochet does 5,197 damage on average. Pretty powerful for a basic. There are also a total of 7 hits across Greater Ricochet, so that is 7 chances to proc poison. That adds in approximately 975 damage, with our base poison modifiers making the total damage from our Greater Ricochet 6,172. Now that's nice and all, but let's turn this up a notch. First, we're going to add in big arrows. Each stack gives plus 2% poison damage up to a maximum of plus 400%. Essentially quintupling your poison damage. It takes a couple minutes to reach max stack, so this is best designed for longer fights. Next, we're going to add in the Blood Reaver Familiar. It has the passive ability that every time you heal, 33% of that healing is done to your target as damage. So if I heal 1,000 damage with Soul Split, then 333 damage will be dealt to my target. While this normally is a token amount of damage, the power comes from the fact that each one of these small hits has the same chance of proccing poison as a regular attack. You can also use the Vampirism Aura to get a second source of healing outside of Soul Split. Now, if I Greater Ricochet, I will get 7 hit spots from Greater Ricochet, 7 hit spots from the Blood Reaver doing damage based off my Soul Split heals, and another 7 hit spots based on my Blood Reaver doing damage off my Vampirism heals. That gives 21 total hit spots, 3 times as much. On top of that, with our big arrows, the poison damage is now 5 times as much, making the overall effective increase 15 times on our poison. So if we take our Greater Ricochet from above, that's 5,197 damage from the ability, and then another 14,639 damage from poison hits, making the total damage 19,836. Yes, you can do nearly 20k damage on average with a basic with these poison builds. It's pretty crazy. One last thing before we get into the game, the Bow of the Last Guardian synergizes very well with this, as its passive and special attack adds a lot of hits. Every 4 hits with the bow will add another hit, so it's de facto a 25% increase on building big arrow stacks and also getting poison damage. This doesn't mean that this isn't viable without the T95 bow, but you'll see a drop off without it. If you don't have the new bow, try this out with the Noxious Longbow, Decimation, or Saren Godbow, and it's still going to slap. It just won't be Staff of Armadyl level good without the T95 bow. Oh my, I almost forgot to explain how to get this crystal. You receive it by completing Morvran's special Slayer challenge. He tasks you with killing 2014 era bosses, basically the bosses when he came out. Araxor, Dagonoth Kings, God Wars Dungeon 1, QBD, KBD, I think Giant Mole is also on there. And each boss gives you a debuff, one of which is the Healing Crystal. Once you've completed the challenge, you can reclaim the crystal from Morvran at any time. The boss order that you kill them in to complete the challenge doesn't really matter, but I'd start with Araxor as the only hard boss on there, so that you're not killing Araxor with 9 different debuffs in your inventory. There are 4 main bosses that I think this setup is viable for, and they are Arch-Glacier, Ambassador, Karapak, and Solo Solak. These bosses are all poisonable while being more than a couple minutes long, which means you have enough time to build the stacks up. First up, we have Karapak. This is a boss that I think has good potential to be good with this combo, but it's not going to do the fight for you, as Phase 4 might be a little bit tricky because you're targeting the clones, and it's kind of annoying to reapply big stacks and at the same time as you're dealing with the clones, and it can mess up with your clone rotation. Phase 1 starts off as normal, just do a Death Swiftness rotation. Your main goal is to phase the boss, aka get him down to 50k life points before his lightning special attack. It's very doable, but if you're finding yourself behind, you can stall out the jumping special attack by standing MD and letting him hit you with melee. While he's battering you with those melee hits, he takes half damage, but his attack rotation is stalled, so it's free time to do damage. Additionally, he takes full poison damage at this point, so it's very nice. Phase 2 and 3 are basically the same, except you have access to Time Warp, and the big stacks are building. You'll notice that Phase 3 goes so quickly sometimes that you don't have time to Time Warp on Phase 4 yet. It just absolutely gets rinsed. For Phase 4, there are 2 methods you can look at. First is attempting to maintain big stack. To do this, you attack the boss every 30 seconds, surging away from the clone, and then hitting the boss. I found this to be a little cumbersome, so I opted instead to just camp when arrows for the final phase, and then reapply big stacks on the boss once the clones were dead. With this method, I was getting approximately 430 kills. Mind you, this is the first hour that I had done at Kara in over a year, and I think with refinement and a little more practice on Phase 4, this has potential to get down to sub 4 minute mark consistently, and even getting to that 330 range, which is very fast. Solo Solak is the next boss, and this is one that I was looking forward to. The fight is so long that you're going to have 400 stacks for a long time, and you can really build up these stacks to have a lot of extra damage from poison. Phase 1 is by far the hardest phase of this whole fight. You're going to want to do a Death Swiftness and DPS the boss down until the approximate 40-second mark. At this point, you need to go around the arena and kill the roots so they don't spawn into lashers. An ability or 2 is usually enough to kill them. Make sure that Solak is getting hit by your greater ricochet to maintain stacks, otherwise you will lose them as 30 seconds will pass while you're killing the roots. If you notice your greater ricochet is not hitting him, just target Solak and hit him with a dazing shot, and that will help maintain the stacks as well. Once the roots are dealt with, just DPS Solak down to 1.5 million HP and get ready for arms and legs. For arms and legs, you again want to make sure that Solak is getting hit by greater ricochet to maintain the stacks. The core is about 20 seconds long, so you want one of your last abilities on the legs to be greater ricochet, so that Solak has 30 seconds at that point. For the core, you can swap to full arrows as you have the accuracy and the extra damage helps with the 1 cycle. If you fail the 1 cycle, it's not the end of the world, you're just wasting about a minute while you re-kill arms and legs. Phase 2 is where you're going to take the most damage. In order to kill the Blightstorm, you need to go up twice. Do it as you would in a group kill, but be mindful of hitting Solak every time you come down and before you go up to make sure you have those big stacks staying on the boss. From there, you go into the cubby hole and DPS. You should phase it around the arm climb and be up to 400 stacks on Solak, so the poison hits are now dealing about 6,000 damage each. I prefer to cleanse at the start of Phase 3 in order to reduce the damage taken from Solak. The rest of the phase goes as normal, and the only thing to note is that when you enter the mine and kill Erythor, it's about 25 seconds between attacks on Solak, so you gotta be quick on the trigger for reapplying big arrows when you come out. For Phase 4, much like the core, you can use full arrows to deal more damage as your accuracy is enough. My thoughts on the healing crystal here is that it really doesn't work too well as you're already always taking damage. Between Solak's melee autos, the Blightstorm, and everything else, you're unlikely to be at max HP very often, and if you are, you can just use Shadow Tendrils. The crystal just makes things harder, especially on Phase 1 and 2 where you take a lot of damage. If you want to simulate more damage, you can Storm Tank instead, which would save time as you don't need to go up to click on the storm, and the constant storm hits are going to keep you off max HP. And big arrows are still going to be extremely good in this combination. I just think the combination with the healing crystal doesn't work too well as you're taking too much damage, so it's hurting more than it's helping. Unlike a boss like Karapak, where Phase 1 to 3 you take virtually no damage, so the crystal isn't doing anything negative. Ambassador is the third boss we're looking at, and it's a great boss for this. There's only one part of the fight where you are directly not attacking the boss, and it's relatively simple to quickly turn and hit the boss with a dazing shot, as is right in the center of the arena. The first phase will happen at 350k damage done, which is 650k HP remaining, so you'll want to try to get that done in a Death Swiftness and a little bit after. I find budgeting it out 300k damage for Death Swiftness is relatively normal. For spinners, how I remind myself to reapply stacks on the boss is every 2 spinners I kill, I go and hit the boss. I tend to forget things often, so these mob-based reminders are good for me and I can build it into my muscle memory. From there, just get on the boss and do damage. On the final phase, you'll have nearly 400 stacks, and you don't need to worry about following the white heals, as your poison does enough damage to out-damage the heals. Not having to follow the white heals is my favorite part about this setup, as I always felt that really annoying on my ED3 log runs. This is a near perfect boss for this setup, as it has an easy first phase, very little of the time in the boss fight you're off the boss, and then a tough final phase that requires a lot of DPS, where the extra poison damage is going to be very helpful. The downside to this setup is that the rest of the dungeon would need to be done with Vampirism as an aura, so you might struggle to get through Terraket and Leviathan quickly, but it makes Ambi a breeze. Last but certainly not least is Glacier. This boss is actually where the idea first originated from, because it was being heavily used to get quick high enrage kills. I decided to try out some 2000% kills, and on my very first kill, I was able to get a sub 5 minute kill, which is pretty crazy, as before this I went for a 200 kill streak, lost it on kill 199, but in the 2000 to 2100% range, I was getting 6-minute kills, so this crystal knocked off 20% of my kills, just like that, and I was using big arrows in that setup as well, so the only thing that changed was the healing crystal. Now, Glacier doesn't have phases, but there's a couple things worth noting. This method doesn't really work past 2500%, as you end up taking too long on arms or minions to maintain the stacks for poison damage, as 30 seconds will go by without hitting the boss. If you get to 400 stacks, you can swap to full arrows, but be mindful to attack with big arrows every 30 seconds. An easy way of doing that is a certain ability you use, always use big arrows with it, whether it be like Dazing Shot or like their first Gricko in a Death Swiftness is always with big arrows. That way you can give yourself a reminder to reapply the stacks. As the healing crystal reduces all healing by 25%, that also includes food you eat and resonance. So if you're going to be resonancing a 20k hit on Flurry, once you heal to full, you will take a 5k hit. So be wary of that, and potentially if you're already near max HP, don't resonance any autos. Big arrows become viable once the kills start to get close to 2 minutes long. At that point, you have enough time to build up enough stacks to do poison damage. For me, that's around the 500% point. If you want to try this out and want to get used to the reduced healing, 500% Glacier would be the place I would go to start learning. And with that, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something about poison builds. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below, but otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one.